Hey, what's going on, family? It's me, Dr. Chris, just hanging out here on top of Twin Peaks in San Francisco. And in today's episode of Dr. Chris TV, you're going to learn how to overcome neediness. We have a primal drive to connect with people. This is one reason why things like social media are enormously popular. And it is perfectly normal and natural to seek out others to meet our basic needs of connection, love, and security. As humans, we have lived in groups since the beginning of our existence, so we are actually dependent on each other for our own survival and emotional well-being. But neediness is the unhealthy side to healthy dependency. It's the unhealthy version of craving contact, fears of abandonment and desertion, and also helplessness. It's important to overcome neediness because the deep need to be loved can be terribly off-putting to others, causing disconnection. What a person is trying to accomplish through demanding constant contact and reassurance, and demanding that the person gets text messages replied immediately, and also making pleas to be taken back, this will actually drive people away rather than creating the connection that others want. So when a person's behaving in a needy way, they're approaching others with a must-have and can't get enough energy that's actually fear-driven. Being in a needy state is like being a pit that can't be filled, and this makes the other person feel consumed and overwhelmed by the demandingness and energy and attention that is required. And so this eventually causes the other person to avoid and push away the person who is being needy. So right now I'm at Christie Fields in San Francisco, and before we go on to the solutions of overcoming neediness, I just want you to think about this paradox in relationships. And this paradox is of togetherness and separateness. Now, I want you to think about relationships as like holding onto water. If we're too tight, holding the relationships too tight, that's togetherness. The water's just gonna go everywhere. But if we're holding on to relationships way too loose, like this, we're not going to have the relationships as well. So that's separateness. So you want to have that perfect balance of togetherness and separateness. Okay? So that would be like, well, like right in the middle, that in between togetherness and separateness, and that's the paradox of relationships, and we'll go more into that in the next section. So step number one of overcoming neediness is having awareness and acceptance. Now, we may be engaging in behaviors that may be perceived and experienced by others as needy, and we may not even be aware of it. So once we become aware of these behaviors, it's important to accept them, because once we accept them, we have ownership over them, and so we can then change them. So here are some examples of needy behavior, and we may be just engaging in one of them, but these behaviors exist on a continuum from seriousness to, maybe a little more mild. So for example, demanding that your partner respond to text messages immediately, pushing for a relationship to become serious too soon, going on your partner's social media profile and doing things like liking old photos that are perhaps months or even a year old. Also, spending more time with your partner and neglecting your friends. Another example of this would be asking and demanding constant reassurance that your partner still likes you and has feelings for you. Step number two is about gaining insight from our past and making the connections into the present. So the way we show love to others is strongly related to how love was shown to us, especially in early childhood. And neediness is related to what we did not receive in early childhood, and that is trying to make bids for connection and being rejected. So ask yourself this important question: what experiences did I have in my childhood where I didn't receive the love and attention that I needed? So now you have awareness of your behaviors and more insight as to the origins of these behaviors and feelings related to neediness. Now, step number 3 involves catching your emotions when feeling triggered. So the first signal that a needy behavior could occur is that you will have a strong emotional response to something. So this strong emotional response will be either fear, panic, anxiety, or anger. Your body will then give you physiological responses such as increased heart rate, dizziness, and perhaps even sweating. So your job is to notice those physiological responses and to identify the associated emotion with those physiological responses, whether it's fear, anxiety, sadness, or anger. And when you identify the emotion, you got to say to yourself, right now I'm feeling whatever it is that emotion it is that you're feeling. So right now I'm feeling anger. Right now I'm feeling anxious. Okay? So that would be your job, to identify the emotion that you're experiencing in that moment. Okay, so step number 4 is to sit with those emotions and not to react on them. This is known as the sacred art of pausing. So the way this works is when you become emotionally triggered, rather than reacting on the emotion and having to do something about it, you're sitting with those emotions and not reacting to it. You're letting those emotions wash over you, because emotions come like waves. They come and then they go. Now, it may take some time, so what you got to do to help yourself through that process is you got to engage in deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, where you're breathing through your belly and releasing that oxygen. So as you're sitting and deep breathing, you got to ask yourself, can I simply just let this be, or do I need to respond to it? Do I need to react to it right away? Now, the sacred art of pausing allows you to have clarity, because you're regulating your emotions by simply sitting with those emotions and breathing through them. So now that your emotions are more regulated, you can move on to step number 5, and that is identifying the triggers. And you do this by asking yourself, what does this remind me of from my past? And also, how does this have a similar emotional quality to what I've experienced in the past? So now you can move on to step number 6, and that's separating the past from the present. And the way you do this is by already identifying your triggers, which you've done in the previous steps, and using it in the following phrase. Even though this reminds me of my past experience, let's say it was being rejected, this is not what's happening right now, even though it has a similar emotional quality to it. So now you could do something called opposite action, and that is doing the opposite behavior to what your initial emotional reaction was driving you to do. So for example, let's say you were going to send out 5 text messages to your partner asking, where are you, why aren't you responding? Well, you would do the opposite of that. You're going to do an alternative behavior from what you initially were going to do. So that would be opposite action. So let's talk about mindsets to overcome neediness. Now, a lot of these suggestions may sound counterintuitive, and the reason for this is because a lot of the messages we hear from the mainstream media in terms of how to go about having a successful relationship actually perpetuate a lot of needy behaviors and mindsets. So for example, you take a movie like Hitch with Will Smith. Basically, the main character is constantly being persistent to the point of almost being a stalker, which is quite creepy, and he gets the relationship he wants in his life. So those kinds of examples don't exemplify changing your mindset and changing your behaviors, but being persistent, doing weird, creepy things will get you the results you want. So I just want you to be open-minded to some of these suggestions, and they will help you have the relationships you want and also have less needy behaviors. So mindset number 1 is that your partner cannot be your primary source of happiness. You have different kinds of needs in life. You have intellectual needs, physical needs, emotional needs, and you need to divvy up that amongst other people in your life, like friends and family. And because it's too burdensome to put all of that onto one person. Okay, so the next step is outcome dependence versus outcome independence. Now, what this means is when a person becomes too outcome dependent, they are too emotionally involved in a particular outcome they want. And I see this a lot when a person starts dating someone and they start imagining and fantasizing about marrying the person. They say to themselves, this is the one, and things don't turn out the way they want it. And they become so hurt and depressed afterwards. They are too outcome dependent. So becoming outcome independent is to go into relationships just not expecting these kinds of outcomes that they want. Now, it's important to have goals in mind of dating and relationships, but do not become too attached to the outcome. The next mindset is, I respect the boundaries of others. Now, just as much as we all like to have our own boundaries and privacy respected, well, so do others. And just because someone can be contacted instantaneously doesn't mean we have to do it all the time. So it's important to respect boundaries of others so that people don't feel smothered and overwhelmed. So the next mindset is, I have my own identity and my partner has their own separate identity. If you start noticing yourself changing your opinions and views and preferences about things in life just to match your own partner's out of fear of rejection, well, this could be a problem, because in the long run, if you keep on doing this, you're gonna lose your own identity. And this will happen, and there'll be too much enmeshment and merging of identities, which is actually not healthy. So the next mindset is, I can soothe myself and find peace when alone. As adults, a sign of emotional maturity is if we can be alone, if we can soothe ourselves when we need to. Because as children, we had our parents there, and tragically, sometimes we didn't have caretakers to soothe us as well. But we have to learn how to develop those skills to soothe ourselves and be comfortable alone sometimes. So the next mindset is, healthy relationships are built on togetherness and separateness. Now, this is a paradox and requires constant negotiation and communication throughout the relationship, because your physical and emotional needs and your partners are going to be changing throughout the course of the relationship. So it's important to be able to have that open communication about togetherness and separateness. Okay, thank you, family. I'm so happy and grateful we got to go on this journey together. It took a lot of digging deep inside and being honest with ourselves, and you have so much courage for doing so. And I just want to hear from you now. So in the comment section below, just tell me about one situation where maybe you engaged in a little bit of needy behavior, but how you're going to resolve that using the strategies that we talked about today. So once again, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.